things overnight.
Nicely quiet, not a peep from the rooms.
Well, there wouldn't be, given that only 7 guests were in residence, among them their 3 long-term boarders, and none were the sort to stay up late. By midnight, they had likely been abed for hours. Any trouble with the Queen Bess? The public house down the street made for good neighbours most of the time, but bank holidays occasionally meant messes to clear up and, intermittently, broken windows when its patrons turned into amateur pugilists. He set her breakfast tray on the desk by the window, straightened it with care, and turned to face her.
Not as bad as Boxing Day. Quieted down long before last orders.
Good, good. I always sleep well when I know you're at the front desk.
Thank you, miss,
Arthur said, his ears reddening at the compliment.
I'll see you this evening, then.
The particulars varied, but the essentials remained the same. In the 14 years Arthur had been night manager, neither he nor Edie had deviated from the established formula for their morning conversation. She knew he was married, and that his wife's name was Florence, but he called her Flossie. She knew he had 2 children, Arthur Jr. and Gawain. The latter name a startlingly poetic choice for such a placid and practical man, and she knew his address, and of course exactly how much he made, since she was the one who paid his wages. But she'd gleaned nearly every scrap of information from overheard conversations and second-hand exchanges with other hotel employees. Not once had she and Arthur spoken of his life beyond the hotel, and if she were ever to unbend herself and ask after Flossie and the children, she was almost certain he would faint on the spot. She never called him Arthur to his face, though she thought of him that way. She thought of all her employees as family, though she could never allow herself the luxury of friendship with them.
Be friendly, her father had liked to remind her, but remember that you're not their friend. You're not meant to be friends.
Edie had remembered that advice, together with everything else Pa had told her, when she'd been left with the hotel. A few months shy of 21, still in shock after the death of her parents, suddenly responsible for the livelihood and well-being of 18 full-time employees, she'd clung to her memories of Pa and Mum and the generations of Howards before them. Her family had kept the Blue Lion open and modestly profitable for almost 400 years. She had only to follow in their footsteps. Pa had loved to tell her stories of the hotel, so while other girls fell asleep to fairy tales or stories from schoolgirls' own, Edie's bedtime fare had been the unfolding saga of the Blue Lion and its glorious past.
It was our ancestor, Jacob Howard, who founded this hotel, her father would often begin. Mind you, it was an old building even then, never mind the Victorian coat it wears now, and ever since then, for 17 generations, there's been a Howard at the helm. Your mother and I have the running of it now, just as your grandparents did before us, which means...
It will be mine one day. Left unsaid was all that had happened before she was born. Her brothers, killed during the Great War, lost in the mud and blood of the Somme, and Edie the replacement, conceived so the Howard name would not die along with them. The disappointment of her being a girl was never mentioned, of course.
Think of it, Edie. Every timber and flagstone and scrap of plaster and stick of furniture in these buildings will be yours, and that makes you the luckiest girl in London.
She had believed him then, but now she wasn't so sure. It all depended, she supposed, on what one accounted as luck. The little clock on her mantel trilled the hour. 7 o'clock already, her breakfast growing cold, and the entire day yet to get through. One day she would lounge in bed until noon, and she would eat her breakfast without getting up, never mind the crumbs, and she'd spend all afternoon reading. One day, after the coronation, when she had restored the hotel's fortunes, and the weight of it all didn't sit quite so heavily on her shoulders. Today, however, she could not afford to linger. Instead, she ate her toast and marmalade, poured her tea and gulped it down, and then set about getting dressed. She always wore the same thing, excepting the odd evening out, for it saved time in the morning and, more importantly, made her instantly recognized.